Hey, what's going on, guys? So, The Power Fantasy by Kieran Gillen and Casper Wingard is, without a doubt, one of the best comics on the shelves right now. This is definitely my favorite ongoing, and I was fairly late to the party on this. I jumped on board with the series just as Volume 2 dropped at my local comic shop. Not that I wasn't aware of it, it's just on the surface, this comic has a very been there, done that, what more needs to be said with that idea kind of premise, in that what if people in the real world had comic book style superpowers?
What a novel idea.
But like everything, this just comes down to execution, and quite frankly, Kieran Gillen isn't a hack, so that helped a lot. Also, Casper Wingard is an artist that I was familiar with, in that I've seen their art, but never actually read anything by them. But like, I'm aware of Homesick Pilots, and I'm aware of All Against All, but I've never read them. So this is my first real exposure to his art. And like I said, without burying the lead, this is my favorite ongoing comic book right now. And the premise is very simple. If people with bullshit reality breaking comic book superpowers existed in the real world, not only would they completely reshape the 20th century, but they as individuals would be treated like first world nuclear armed nation states, which is why the super people of this world are referred to as atomics, because they're literally walking A-bombs, and the book is really just about how terrifying of a concept that truly is. So, The Power Fantasy is a Cold War style political drama about really four atomics. There's seven, but the main focus is just on four of them. Santa Valentina is, for all intents and purposes, your Superman analog. She's the world's first atomic and was born just as the first nuclear bomb was tested. And Valentina is, or at least she claims to be, an angel made flesh to guide humanity through its own hubris, which, as a result, kind of positions her as the only real traditional superhero in the book. Kinda. There's Etienne Lux, an Omnipath, which is basically just the most busted version of a telepath. He's Professor X on crack, and as a result, he's obsessed with being ethical, which, from the first page, makes him an interesting foil against Valentina, who's constructed her entire worldview around taking the moral high ground, and how those two principles slightly differ. Which again, gives them a really interesting dynamic. You have the Heavy, who is this anti-nuclear hippie with the ability to control gravity. He's basically the Magneto of the book. And finally, there's Jack Magus, who is a reality warping magician who amplifies his powers using a pyramid scheme from within an actual floating pyramid. And like I said, there are other atomics, but they're more like satellite superpowers, or proxies, more appropriately, if we're running with the nation-state allegory. But everything really revolves around these four characters, and how each of them are doing what they can to mediate between the other atomics. Because unlike most other, for lack of a better term, power fantasy fiction, where the object of the narrative is to culminate in some sort of conflict or climactic battle, this is the opposite. Gillen and Wingard frame the overall narrative around everybody doing everything in their power to avoid conflict, because on top of being nigh immortal, when you put to scale just how destructive their powers are to a human perspective, having two or more atomics in conflict with one another will result in an extinction level event. And minor spoilers, but it's something that's referenced in passing early on, but you don't actually see how it happens until later in the book. But Europe is gone, and you see what happens eventually. Casper Wingard illustrates it beautifully, but it's not some big choreographed, drawn out action sequence like in a Superman comic or an X-Men comic. It's just two superpowered entities colliding with one another, and it kills like a million people. And so far, that's really been the only big action sequence of the book. There's another one that's often alluded to with one of the other satellite atomics, Morishita Masumi. Her power is that when she gets depressed or anxious or even just a little emotionally unbalanced, subconsciously summons a kaiju, and in 1982 she apparently almost leveled Tokyo. And so far, the only thing keeping her baseline is her emotional support pet human goth GF that Etene routinely lobotomizes to keep stable so that she can manage Morishita's emotions. And that's the thing with this book. Every character interaction, every microaggression, every sentence that feels like it could be interpreted the wrong way, all of it is like wrapping a rubber band around your finger and waiting for it to snap. But the snap in this case is one of the atomics losing it, prompting all-out conflict, which in that case everyone just loses. And it's very much analogous for the horror of nuclear-armed nations and the terror that we've all just sort of learned to live with over the generations. Something else that I really like about the book so far is how Caspar Wingard will subtly shift his art style to accommodate the POV of whatever character the book is focusing on, or how their powers distort and shift reality. It really makes the powers feel daunting in a way that they normally wouldn't in a regular superhero book. And it really pushes the book into the realm of sci-fi horror in a really interesting sense. And I think this would be attributed to Ryan Hughes, who's the designer of the book. But at least in the trade paperbacks, every issue there's a timeline or an infographic that lore dumps key events. Some of them are events in the book that we've seen, and some of them are foreshadowing, and I thought that was really cool in my first read through, and it really reminded me a lot of what Hickman was doing with X-Men. And speaking of the X-Men, and I don't know how this didn't come up earlier, but it's actually the reason why I picked the book up in the first place. My buddy, who's the owner of Pure Panic Comics in Silver Spring, Maryland, it's a great store by the way, that's where I picked up volume 1, but he sold me on the first volume by saying that it's like if X-Men was Watchmen, which wasn't super far off. There's an interview that Gillen did with AIPT Comics where he talks about how the power fantasy came about from him writing Immortal X-Men, and him coming up with plot threads and story ideas that just would not work within the context of the Marvel Universe. And with that in mind, it's kind of fun to think about the character analogs and who they'd be within the context of the power fantasy. You know, it's kind of like when you're reading Watchmen, but imagining the core cast as their Charlton Comics counterparts. You know, Ichine and the Heavy are obviously Professor X and Magneto. I mean, the Heavy literally has an Asteroid M-style base that he flies around the globe. Valentina, I couldn't figure out, but my girlfriend said that she's an analog for the Phoenix, and that kind of just fits. You know, it's the only match that makes sense to me. Eliza Hellbound is either Magic or Scarlet Witch. I can't figure out who Jack Magus would be, though. Then again, I'm not the world's biggest X-Men guy, so if it's not one of the obvious one-for-ones, then I'm just not going to get it. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this book so far. If you like science fiction, if you like Watchmen, if you like the X-Men, or if you just like weird science fiction stories, definitely check this book out. Again, it's my favorite comic on the shelves right now, but what about you? Have you read the Power Fantasy? If so, what do you think about it so far? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. I'm the Mystical Green Beanie, thank you for watching, and as always, until next time, take care guys, and happy reading. Peace.